Welcome to episode 16 of the Bulls REKAP Podcast. I'm Joe Cowley of the Chicago Sun-Times. You could read me, obviously, in the sports section of the Chicago Sun-Times, or follow me at J. Cowley Hoops on X. It's not a fun follow. You'll probably get pissed and get rid of it quickly. But if you want to, you can always do that. I'm not even going to waste any time. I mean, his voice is silky smooth, as is his attire. The best dressed guy at a Bulls game, Adam Amin. Welcome, buddy.
I really don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all.
I do. I
that's
think,
sweet of you.
I think there's Casey Johnson's always got the tie on, but you got a smoothness to your fashion. So
I appreciate it.
So hey, I always like origin stories, and I remember growing up, I'd hear my grandma Bada from Sicily talk about how her dad came over from Sicily, came over by himself, started bringing individuals over one at a time.
Yep.
And you'd always think, well, but that felt so far away because it was 3 generations before me.
Right.
Your pops was a badass. For him to up and leave by himself out of Pakistan, come to the United States, kind of have this plan that he's slowly going to bring everyone over. I mean, that's the American story, right? Had you ever, before he passed, had you ever had a chance to talk to him just like as a grown-up, like man to man, what went into his thought process of just saying, I have to do this. I've got this is what I have to do for our family.
One of the big, not regrets, but one of the disappointments I have is that I didn't get more out of him because I think, it's just one of those lessons that comes with death. You realize, you always think you have more time. And he was 80 years old when he passed, so it's not like it was a shocking passing, but at the same time, you're like, he was in such good health, and we talked all the time. I talked to him the day before he passed away on the phone. We were just chatting about whatever, with the stuff we always talk about. I just did a game at Florida, and now I'm going to head to Connecticut for whatever. And like, we'd always talk about this stuff. So in your head, you just think, I got plenty of time, and I'll ask him. So I wish I had more. I did sit down with him a couple of times, just when we were driving around or sitting around together, and I would always ask him about like little questions. I never got the full, I don't think, story, but I always asked little questions. He was about 40 years old. He was 40 years old when he left. So passing at 80, spending 40 years of your life in Pakistan, 40 years of your life in the United States, I always thought that was very symmetrical. And I'm getting closer to that age 40, in a couple of years. So I think about that a little bit more often than maybe I used to. He said, there was a bunch of issues in the Middle East and South Asia in terms of government issues. There were various wars that had taken place in the 1970s. Obviously conflicts in Iran were very apparent at that time. Think about what happened with the 1980 U.S. hockey team. Obviously, we're what is it now? 45 years. We just hit the 45-year anniversary of that. So I'm sure that was a top of mind for some people. But general vicinity of the globe, not particularly stable, and a lot of religious issues and a lot of religious battles and things like that. My pop was Muslim. So a combination of things, it seemed like, from what I gathered, led to him making this decision that he and his brother were going to come over to the United States. Now, at this point, he had a wife and 3 children. His brother had a wife and 3 children as well. So they were leaving, 8 people at home back in Pakistan. They were just leaving, and they were coming to Chicago. They immediately came to Chicago and started working blue-collar jobs downtown at a factory where they molded and shaped windows that are still on some of the high-rise buildings that you might drive past when you're driving downtown, right? And this is a guy that was the vice president of a bank in Karachi. So this was a white-collar, well-off, stable person in his home country. And because there was enough instability around him, or maybe he felt like, I also got the sense that he felt like he wasn't doing enough. He could have been more comfortable. There were more opportunities. I think a lot of that idea has spread over many generations, right? The same way that it probably happened with your grandparents and great-grandparents. They were probably like, hey, there's more chances to do more, or there's money, or there's the promise of safe harbor, or whatever. There's a million reasons, it feels like, to make a move like that. And I think a few of those were top of his mind. But he did it with just his brother, and they left, 6 kids between the 2 of them. Or it was 5 kids at the time. I'm sorry, I'm older than one of them. It was 5 kids at the time back in Pakistan. 2 wives, 5 kids, and hoping that those guys can handle themselves okay. He left enough money. But my question for him was, why didn't you bring everybody? And he said he had saved up enough money because, like I said, he was a well-off person. Saved up enough money to where he could bring like 2 kids and the wife, but would have to leave somebody behind.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't leave the oldest. I don't want to leave the oldest to fend for himself. He's 13 at the time. I don't want to leave the youngest because obviously, for obvious reasons. I don't want to bring the kids and leave my wife because I got to go work. I can't take care of the children. So he's like, the best thing for me to do is to come on my own. His brother thought the same thing because it was just easier to take care of themselves, send money back, and hopefully get them here as quickly as possible. That process took 7 full years before they all reunited in the United States. He came over. They came over. My dad and his brother in late '78. The rest of the family came over in 1985.
I mean, that's the American story right there. That's awesome. So obviously, people don't know you. National broadcast. You do the Bulls. You do Fox football. I mean, you do it all. But growing up, so you grew up in Chicago. You go to Valpo. Did you go there for broadcasting, or did you go there with an idea of, it's probably some kind of communication I'd like to get into, and just kind of fell into it?
I declared 2 majors when I went over there. Theater was one, and television and radio was the other. Okay. And I had to pick. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got to college. I had a friend of mine who is still working in the business to this day. He's the voice of Florida Atlantic University. He does a phenomenal job down there. He's done ESPN Radio National hosting. He's from my same hometown, Addison, Illinois, Ken Levica. And he was a close friend of mine, a few years older than me. He went to Valpo, and he was about to become the general manager of the radio station. And I was in my senior year of high school, and he said, listen, if you want to try broadcasting, which I had messed around with in high school, if you want to try it, come to Valpo. I'll put you on the air. And I come from a family where, like, you have to get good grades. You have to be studious. I was a very good high school student who did not want to do, I didn't want to go into medicine like my mom wanted me to do, which is a very kind of stereotypical South Asian, Middle Eastern profession, which that's not a bad stereotype by any means.
No, that's fine. Trust me.
It's a good stereotype, but I just, it wasn't for me. I was squeamish. I wasn't good at science. I just didn't want to do that. I thought I was going to go to school for business, like business management. My dad ran a restaurant and did real estate along with his regular job, which was working 80 hours a week as a security guard. So he kind of typified all right, well, if I'm not going to do medicine, mathematics, chemistry, accounting, if I'm not going to do one of these, stable, high level, maybe high paying down the line jobs, at least he gave me some kind of example of you can piecemeal it together and be an okay person. But I think they wanted more from me. So they wanted me to follow the academic route. I was a creative. I stopped playing. I played football, basketball, baseball as a freshman. I didn't really want to do that after my freshman year. I played volleyball after that. And I spent the rest of my time singing, playing the violin, playing the guitar, DJing, acting in plays, acting in musicals. I was an all-state actor. I was an all-state singer. I really leaned into the performance side of stuff. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got to college. Ken gave me kind of a lifeline. I said, I'll apply. I got in. The first day of moving in, I went to the radio station, or I went to an event, like a freshman social, and I found the advisor for the radio station. And I said, my friend Ken told me to come here, and I'm supposed to get into radio. What do I do? And Paul, who I just got off the phone with about 40 minutes ago, still one of my closest friends to this day, who's a professor there and still is, said, I'll take you there. And he took me to the radio station. I never left. I started doing the production. I ran the production department as a freshman, which didn't exist until my sophomore year. I started doing sports broadcast. I started doing update anchoring, news anchoring, anything I could do. I would sleep there some nights, just editing late at night. And it just became kind of this thing that I was really excited about and I was excited to do. And as I got more experience, it became a legitimate possibility to make it into a career.
There aren't a lot of guys. I mean, I don't know that end of the profession that well. I know it well enough, but there aren't a lot of guys that graduate and then within, 2 or 3 years, you're signed by ESPN. I mean, first of all, that's like a meteoric climb. I won like a big national award, the William Randolph First Award, my senior year at Kent State.
Yep.
Was totally digging myself, tasting myself. I was like Robbie Benson from One on One. I can go anywhere I want, up your ass with a red hot poker. And then all of a sudden, reality kicks you in the face.
Yeah.
I was cocky with all these professors, blah blah blah, and then I had to start off in a weekly. Which anybody that knows the journalism profession, if you're at a weekly and if you don't get out of there in 2 years, you die at that weekly.
Sure.
So it was humbling. You go from Valpo, 2 years later, ESPN signed you to do college football, college basketball, correct?
Yep.
First of all, was it kind of a whirlwind for you? And secondly, was it almost too much for you where you're like, oh shit, at 24, 25, however old you were, the ego had to be here. And was there a humbling process that you had to go through to kind of ground you where you say, everything's not always going to be this easy for me in this profession and in life?
Those 2 years were really important, the interim of those 2 years, because I finished up at Valpo. I had won 2 Indiana Sportscaster of the Year awards for college kids. I had won a production award. I was top 5 in the Jim Nance award voting, which was the first year they did that, an award that's still going on to this day, which is awesome. And I felt good. I felt good about myself. I was like, all right, I got a pretty good resume for a college kid. I've done 250 some odd broadcasts in 4 years of being at Valpo just because we had so many opportunities to do them. And then I thought, all right, well, I should be able to find a job. I was in my second year as an intern at the Gary Railcats minor league baseball team.
Minor league, okay.
The independent league at the time. Still independent, actually, to this day, but like they were in the Northern League at the time. And I was like, all right, well, at least I have a gig right out of the gate. I between junior and senior year, the broadcaster for the team was an SID at Valpo. He had heard me over the last couple of years. He said, hey, I think you got good, you have good work. You have a good tape. I need a partner. I can't pay you, but you can do all the games. You can do the middle innings of every game that you can get to. So every home game and every game in Schaumburg and Joliet that I drove to during that summer, I did with Andy Viano, who's a wonderful broadcaster and a great guy. And he hired me the following summer after I'd finished at Valpo, which, by the way, I didn't graduate from Valpo in 4 years, which is something I still had like 10 credits left. And my plan was, well, I'm going to go to summer school. I'll just take the classes, I'll work, and then I'll have my degree, and then I can go get a job. And what you quickly realize is opportunities come and they leave quickly. And I was like, well, that's a $500 a month job. I will make no money because I'm going to drive an hour from Addison to Gary every day. Gas money. And that's gas money. That's all it is every month. And gas was relatively expensive at the time. We were just kind of in recession territory. So I know a lot of people were dealing with a bunch of different things. So I knew that this was just, I was going to take the opportunity. And it's just something that drew me. I'm like, forget the classes. I need to do this because I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to work in the industry. So I took a little bit of a risk. I finished that job up, and then there was nothing. Like I said, a lot of people who were in broadcasting with the recession, it had just kind of eliminated a bunch of jobs. It had lowered the prices and salaries of a lot of jobs, which is typical of a essential, an entertainment side of things. So I was like, all right, well, let's start applying. Let's hope. I was living with my parents for, a couple of months, just trying to find a job. I finally got an offer to go to Spirit Lake, Iowa, small town, 3,000 people, go be the sports director at this radio station in the middle of Northwest Iowa, where you're going to be cold, snowed in, isolated. You're going to have to wake up at 5 a.m. every day to go do the morning show. Then you got to go do the sportscast. Then you got to do the 5 p.m. And then you're driving to some nearby town, anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours away, to go call the boys and girls basketball games. And then you're going to drive back at 11 o'clock at night, eat at a bad fast food place, smoke too many Newport cigarettes on the drive back, and go home and wake up the next day and do it all over again. And that was the time that was significantly humbling for me, because I don't think I thought I was a hot shot. I don't think I felt like, I deserve better than this. But it was humbling to be like, you need to work your ass off in this business. There's a reason that this is hard, because it's a business. I think writing, journalism, broadcasting, anything involving sports, it's meant to cut you out early. It is meant to get you out of there, so that, because it's so competitive, because it's the fun side, it's the sandbox, it's the toy store of, a lot of industries to work in sports. It's supposed to be fun. A lot of people want to be a part of it. So I think these jobs and this industry hierarchy is meant to cut you out as early as possible. And that was the job that was meant to cut me out as soon as possible. And I think that was a really important time. I ended up leaving that job, taking another minor league baseball job. That was a little bit of a risk to leave what was going to be a full-time job with salary and benefits and insurance, go take a seasonal job in the summer for a baseball team so that I could just call games and get better at calling games, and then I'll figure it out in the off season. So I went back to Valpo, and I went to the Horizon League, and I went to the NCAA, and people that I had met in my college days and the years prior, and said, what work do you have for me? I'll do anything. Right. Send me anywhere. I'll drive to Massachusetts. I'll drive to Kentucky. I'll drive to Indiana. I'll drive to Wisconsin. I'll drive to a high school. I'll drive to a college, and I'll broadcast your game and, pay me whatever you can. And that was 2 years worth of figuring out what's important in the job, how to be better at it faster, and kind of that was the humbling side of it, a legitimately humbling 2 years.
You brought up two great points. And like if young journalists come or shadow or whatever, or they just ask me or email me and, what can I do, blah, 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 to get to this level or this level, this level. The thing I tell everybody, whether it's writing or in your case, broadcasting, you cannot be opposed to doing shit for free. And the more stuff you do for free, you just grind and grind and grind, and you learn your voice, whether it's through writing or through a microphone. You start to learn your voice. You start to learn how you want to convey your voice, kind of who you are as a person.
Yep.
But nobody's giving you that opportunity. You have to hustle and make that opportunity. I did like this NBA draft guide. This is back in the 80s because I loved Mel Kiper. There was nobody doing basketball. And I start doing this draft guide, the Not Your Average Joe guide to the NBA draft. And then, I'd sell maybe 30 copies in a trade newspaper.
Sure.
And this one guy noticed me, brought me on TV in Cleveland, and I hit the Cavs pick that year. So that helped.
Nice.
And then
who was the Cavs pick, by the way? Who was the pick that year?
Who's the white kid from Florida State that they drafted?
Not Price or Elo or
no. It was after them. It was he was out of Florida State. Now it's going to bother the shit out of me. I'll have to Google it. But that was the pick I hit. And so, and then but again, I was going and doing high school stuff in inner city high schools that the guys that were supposed to be covering Ruben Patterson didn't want to go and cover Ruben Patterson. I'd be like,
sure,
I'll go see this kid. He's at John Hay, where basically if you don't shoot somebody, they'll give you a C. And nobody wants to go down there on a Saturday afternoon and watch a kid like that. And so to your point, I don't think, especially, and I don't know if it's generational, but I think younger people kind of have to understand it shouldn't be below them to go and do stuff for free and grind and dig. And so was there any point where in those 2 years where your mom or dad look at you and they're like, maybe medical school wasn't that bad of an idea?
Maybe not. A couple of times. In fact, by the way, as an aside, was it Bob Sura that you were thinking of?
It was Bob. Yeah, it was Sura.
Bob Sura. Okay.
Exactly what it was. Yeah.
So my parents drove me to Iowa, drove me to Spirit Lake, Iowa. It's about a 500-mile drive from their old home in Addison. So about 8 hours.
Right.
And we packed up 2 cars worth of just stuff. And I remember it was a night of one of the World Series games. It was late October in 2009. It was Yankees-Phillies. And the first thing I did was set up my TV. I was living in a basement, in somebody's basement, for $300 a month. It was basically, so whatever it was, $175 a week, basically, to live in somebody's basement. No laundry, no heat in the bedroom. So I had
awesome bachelor pad right there.
Awesome. Women love to walk.
Yeah, they love basements. Yeah,
they love to walk into a situation like that. I was clearly doing very well with the ladies in Spirit Lake, Iowa. Absolutely not. Nobody other than my parents ever set foot in that home basement. While I was there in the basement. While I was there, so we got 2 space heaters. My new boss was kind enough to get me a bed from her father that they had in their attic. So this dusty bed frame with a mattress that I don't know who, what kind of wars that thing had been through. And I was just like, all right, this is where I'm going to live. And my parents saw this place and were appalled. They're like, you can't do this. Like, I'm like, why? Why can't I do this? Why can't I try? Why can't I try to do this? I also had the luxury of 2 parents who said, if this doesn't work out, you got to come home. And not everybody has that. I also had that as a luxury. I did have a support system, but I did not want to use them. I in my head, I was like, I left college. I finished. I don't live with you anymore. And I cannot take advantage of you anymore, because they did everything in their power for me. And I was like, I can't do this to you. I have to go figure this out on my own, or at least try. I went home for Christmas because I had like 4 days off, and I was like, oh, well, I'll drive home. And I remember driving this my boss gave me a pickup truck to drive, because I was driving a broke down Dodge Neon with a bunch of like, bullet holes in the side of it that I bought when I was in college. And she's like, you can't drive this home. So she gave me a truck to drive home. My dad was sick when I got home, and my mom goes, hey, your dad was supposed to take me to my friend's daughter's wedding. Will you go with me? Will you take me to the wedding? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. I'm home. I haven't seen you in a while. Happy to spend time with my mom. And so I took her to this wedding. We walk in, and we're just about to walk into the banquet hall. And she goes, so listen, I may have told some of my friends that you are in medical school. She straight up was so embarrassed and didn't want to say what I was doing for a living, where I was living, the hellhole that she viewed in her mind as my home in a town that none of these people had heard of or would ever consider venturing to. She was so embarrassed by it that she told her friends, lied to her friends, and told them that I was working to be a doctor.
Did you have to carry out the lie that night?
I carried out the lie to at least 4 of her friends. And of course, this is another kind of stereotype thing, so I don't want to assume this is for everybody, but for me, it felt like a stereotype thing. After explaining to 4 of the women that, oh yeah, I'm in endocrinology. Like, I decided endocrinology because I'd seen it on like an episode of Scrubs or something like that. Right, like, oh, I'm an endocrinology major, and that's what I'm working on, going, getting ready to become a doctor. Later on in those weddings, 2 of those 4 women brought their daughters over to me and were like, by the way, my daughter Bina is single. If you, and I was like, oh my God, you guys are really leaning into the stereotype. Yeah. And so it's like, all right, that was what was important to them at that moment. It was a little embarrassing. You have to swallow your pride a little bit, but I get it. It took me a while to understand why they were so worried, because that's your kid, and you think he's making a stupid decision. You've watched him for 20 years. Like I said, I was a good student. I was a smart kid. I got along with everybody. I could have gone into some other industry and probably been okay, but I don't think I would have been happy. And that time, even though they disagreed with what I was doing, my dad was still supportive. He said, I'm going to give you some time on this, but I'm going to keep checking up on you. And if this isn't going the way you think it's going to go, you got to tell me. I'm not going to force you to come home, but you have to tell me if this is not going well. And I kept that in the back of my mind. And that was, I think, a lot of motivation to make this work. The time in Iowa was great. I'm still friends with the people there to this day, but I drank a lot. I smoked too many cigarettes. I didn't eat well.
That's crazy that did you not worry about your voice with the smoking? Or at that time you were so young you didn't
register in my head. Okay. I came from a family of boys, and again, the boys that were left to their own devices at times when they were growing up. They moved to the States when they were teenagers, basically, or just about to be teenagers. So they were heavily influenced by American culture. I think they all fell into some form of vice, which I've documented in public or in writing at various times in my life. And that was my vice. I was a bad eater and a smoker and a drinker, and I didn't take care of myself. And I think that kind of woke me up a little bit too. At one point in February of 2010, I was like, this isn't right for me. The experience I'm getting is wonderful, and the friends that I've made, to this day, 15, 16 years later, is great. But I need to shift my focus, and that's when I decided I really need to be a play-by-play guy. I was like, that's where I'm happiest. The most fun I have in this job, in this kind of grueling, grinded out job of working, some days 16 to 20 hours, is calling the games. The games make me happy. I love calling basketball. Football, high school football was fun to call, even if it was on the roof of a press box outside of Omaha, Nebraska.
I've been in some of those, yeah.
And it's like, this is what's going to make me happy, and I think this is the thing I'm best at, and this is the thing I could be really good at. So I left that job, applied for a couple of baseball jobs, got one in Somerset, New Jersey, for a team that is now the AA affiliate for the Yankees, but wasn't up until a couple of years ago. They were an independent minor league team in Somerset. in the Atlantic League. And that turned out to be, a huge moment to be able to start to launch the career in the right direction, right trajectory.
Right. So I'm guessing Bina never saw the basement. Bina never made it to the basement.
Okay. Never made it to Iowa. I wonder if she ever goes, is that the guy? Maybe. Whatever.
What happened to med school?
What happened to med school?
So fast forward now, ESPN, obviously everything goes great there. You start doing national stuff. Everything starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When you're at ESPN and you're doing the national stuff, what makes you think or have that eye to somehow in some capacity, I want to get back and do a Chicago team? And obviously, we know that when Neil decided to step down, you were the guy that they chose. But at the same time, it's weird because the industry dictates, or used to at least before you and guys like Benetti, that the hometown guy that does the call is the hometown guy, and that's all he does. That's changed now. And, and to your credit, to Benetti's credit, and there's other people that do it, to come back to your hometown or to do a team, but yet still be able to go out and do that national stuff. How did you know that was going to work? And how'd you even, because that was not the way things were done for decades.
Yeah, for a long time. A lot of that is luck. I think the industry dictated that in some form or fashion. I was close with Joe Davis, still am close with Joe Davis. He and I were actually in the minor leagues together when I was in Gary. He was in Schaumburg, and that's kind of how we met, and that's where we both started. So he and I both ended up on the national side. We were watching. I didn't know Benetti, even though he was a hometown kid. I didn't know Wayne Randazzo very well. Even though they were both hometown kids. But all of us kind of ended up scaling our way up to doing some national stuff and at a relatively high level. And I think after 5 or 6, 7 years of doing that, being on TV enough for people to recognize us, to notice us, we were certainly younger than most of the broadcasters that were doing things on that level. I think maybe that helped push it in that direction as well. Because I think the typical thing that we've seen, or we had seen to that point, was you're a young broadcaster, you start in local TV, maybe you get a local radio job, maybe the local team needs a broadcaster for the 15 games that are on over-the-air television in that town. So you're going to do, 20 Minnesota Twins games on, KCCO or something like that, whatever it might be. And that leads to, now he's the new voice of the Twins. And maybe the national side says, well, hey, can we use you for 5 or 10 games? Can we use you for 10 or 20 games on NBA or MLB? Or, we won't get involved with your local stuff. We'll make sure it's not conflicting. I think when we showed up, having done the national side first, and I don't know why we got hired. I don't know why they were leaning younger. I think maybe that was just the time in their industry where they said, hey, we got some older broadcasters. Brett Musburger's not going to do this forever. Mike Patrick's not going to do this forever. We got to start looking at some of the younger people. I mean, like Jim Nantz got hired when he was 26. Joe Buck got hired when he was 25, 26. Spiro Ditas, Ian Eagle. These guys got hired in their mid to late 20s. It just didn't feel very common at that time. And I think because we got hired by the national teams rather than local, or national outlets rather than the local ones, that helped us kind of create these baselines, these foundations of what you're going to get. Like, we already knew how to handle a lot of the big stuff, even though I think you said this earlier, Joe, I was probably in over my skis at age 24 doing the national stuff, but I also had the luxury of being kind of on lower level things, second, third tier Big East basketball, HBCU football on tape delay, college volleyball, college wrestling, college softball and baseball, things that I think have great followings now, especially in my time at ESPN. I saw how passionate people were about these things, but on just a casual observational level, these aren't things that people are seeking out unless they're fans of it. So when we
or gamblers,
yeah, and it wasn't as prevalent then, right? Yeah. It's much more prevalent now. So I think being on those sports gave us a lot of leeway to make some mistakes. Probably was a great training ground, even though it was on the national side. I was constantly nervous because it was national TV. But in the grand scheme of things, it was right where I should have been to try to learn and cut my teeth better and find the voice that you talked about. And I think after being able to put together a foundation of how to do the job, we got put on bigger things. Benetti started to get on bigger things. Joe went to Fox.
Right.
Wayne started to do more national stuff. I was a staple at ESPN with Benetti at that point. And we started to get bigger and bigger assignments, and that allowed people to see us. I think it was Kevin Cross at NBC Sports Chicago, that saw me do a game. It might have been the women's tournament. It might have been something that kind of drew his attention. And he said, hey, Neil is thinking about taking a step back. We're going to need people to fill in. I want this guy to try. And I know he's a Chicago kid. Let's toss him into the mix. And that's why John Sadak and Lisa Byington and JB Long and Benetti and a bunch of people got these opportunities. And the other part was I was up for the White Sox job with Jason Benetti. It was me, Benetti, and Joe Davis were the three finalists.
What year was the were the White Sox and Bulls close?
They were
about a year apart.
I think it was 16 is when they were looking for somebody to start stepping in for Hawk. And it came down to me, Benetti, and Joe Davis. And Joe had kind of already known he was going to take – it might have been 17. I can't remember at this point. But it might have been that he already knew he was going to be the Dodgers' backup guy for Vin Scully. And he was going to kind of be in line. So he took the interview because he wanted to take the interview. But I think he knew that it's good experience. The Dodgers' job was his. So it came down to me and Benetti. And my disappointment of not getting the job was pretty heavy. I was like, man, that sucks. Like, I really wanted the gig.
Right.
Later, then I was like, well, Jason's from the area. He grew up a Sox fan. They absolutely picked the right guy, and I was thrilled for him. And the twist and turn of that allowed me to do the NBA on ESPN. And that allowed me to step in as the fifth TV guy in a 4-person rotation. So I got 3 or 4 or 5 offshoot games. I got to do Christmas Day, which is a huge thrill in 2016.
Huge, yeah.
And
exposure, yeah.
And huge exposure.
Yeah.
My first game I ever did for ESPN for the NBA was Bulls Timberwolves when Tom Thibodeau came back. Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Levine is on the Timberwolves. Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson are still on the Bulls at that point. Bulls had a 22, 23-point lead and blew it. Minnesota came all the way back and won the game. Yeah. But that was my first foray into the NBA, and that got me noticed. I started doing ESPN radio. I jumped right into the playoffs that year. I started doing conference finals that season on ESPN radio. That's a huge gig to get at that point. I'm not even 30 at that age and at that point, and I'm getting that opportunity. So those huge gigs and getting the NBA experience, I think, exposed me to the people in Chicago. They brought me in. I was the first fill-in in November of 2018 in Dallas, and I remember doing the game, and Stacey and I got along right away, and Stacey went to bat for me, and I think he knew he was going to have to work with a lot of people in the next year while Neil was taking some road games off, because that's what they were scheduled. Like, basically, Neil was doing all the home games, and fill-ins were doing the road games. But he called, one of the broadcast directors and marketing directors after our first game and said, this is the guy. Because I already had some NBA experience, 2 years worth. Yeah. I had done big playoff games. I called LeBron James buzzer beaters on radio, and I had called playoff games on TV. So I had the prerequisite experience, but all that work led to getting that. Not getting the White Sox job helped lead to getting that, which led to the folks at NBC, which led to Stacey, which led to getting the job. And a lot of those dominoes have to fall exactly in that order. And it's easy to kind of look at them as these little pieces, but when you scope out 30,000, 50,000 feet, they're these tiny little specks that you hope bounce in the right direction, and they happen to.
The thing that, and I've talked to you about this, the thing that I think is so smart for teams to do what they're doing, obviously the Benetti thing spiraled and went a different way, but at the same time, the idea that they still did it, bringing in these guys that have a national presence, a national following, to me, it legitimizes your broadcast. It makes your broadcast. I moved here in the end of 97. It was Harry, Hawk, obviously Neil, and those were like staple guys. But they always felt hometowny. Hawk was going to dadgum it and get mad and stuff like that.
I remember listening to Pat Foley all the time. I was a huge, 1990s, like a lot of us were 1990s Blackhawks fans and couldn't watch the home games. So anytime we could watch the road games, it was Pat that on the call.
And to me, a lot of people move here from other places. So to move here from another place, I don't have Joe Tate anymore, who I grew up with. But I don't want a homer. This is where I'm living. I don't die and starve for these teams. I want a guy who is good. And so, that was always the trouble I had when I first came here. By teams doing this now and bringing in a guy who's a national guy, yes, I could tell you're doing the home broadcast for the Bulls, but I cannot tell that you are dying and living with every play, because I mean, that's a fine line for you guys to walk.
Yeah.
You're a national guy, but you know who's also paying you to do the hometown broadcast. But it feels different. It feels more professional. I like it. I like it better. I thought the old way of Hawk and dadgummit and getting mad at the umpires and Harry and guys like that, it was cutesy. But to me, times have changed where the world's gotten bigger, and I need a guy who's just doing his job. Is that tough for you to say, do have a national presence, but I'm also doing the Bulls and I am their guy?
I don't think it's as hard of a balance as it has been at times. I think your point is the biggest one. Times have changed, and that means fans have changed. And there are still plenty of fans who are straight up homers. And I get criticism from people once in a while that say, like, man, I want a guy who, like, is going to get pissed at the refs.
But you also have Stacey. I mean, that helps.
And sure. And Stacey is more of that. Because he does live and die with this team, because it is his team. I didn't play for these guys. I cried when Jordan won championships because I was sitting on the couch with my dad. Like, I still have incredible emotional ties to the team. But I think fans are smarter now than they've ever been, because they have more access to more information than they ever have. That also means that they can create narratives that aren't very accurate as well. So I think it's better for the person in charge of the call to try to be a little bit more, not neutral in the call, but neutral in how you frame the game itself. Like, you'll hear me get way more excited on a Kobe White 3 that should not go down, and a 4-point play to tie the game against Toronto. We go hard on those calls. And Stacey goes hard and goes, Kobe White, this and that. And I get the call hard. I also get excited, and I also acknowledge when Donovan Mitchell has a 71-point game. I can't pretend that that's not happening in front of me. And I don't think most fans now want you to pretend that you've got the wool over your eyes, because they're not stupid. I also think, being in Chicago, I model myself after guys like Ian Eagle and Mike Breen, who I think are two of the best basketball announcers, two of the best announcers in general.
Yeah, football, everything.
Two of the best basketball announcers of my lifetime. And they're the New York guys. They're the Knicks and the Nets. And I've known Mike personally for a long time. I've known Ian longer. And Ian's one of my true mentors. He's the one that helped me kind of kickstart my career when I was in Jersey. And I listen to them and how they approach the game. They don't disrespect players from the other team, because why would you? You don't, just because they're not on your team doesn't mean you get to pretend that you're an athlete suddenly and you could do the things that they do. I've observed enough NBA basketball. I've observed and called enough basketball in my life to know when a play should be made or not made, but we don't make things personal. And I think I cannot make things personal, because that's not who I am as a human being. I wouldn't trash a player because they didn't make plays. Yeah, do I think some of these guys are overpaid for the lack of production? Of course, everybody does. I feel that too. Everybody does. But I also I try not to bring those feelings into how we frame the game, how we frame the Bulls, how we frame the opponent, how we get excited or not excited for certain things happening, or how we do get excited for the opponent because the play is that good. I think that's important to respect that. And I think fans appreciate that more now because of their access to information, because of their access to the games, because of their access to knowledge more now than ever before. I think they recognize that too. And New York, LA, Chicago, I think we should approach things differently. I think we should approach ourselves as major markets. I think we should approach our teams and our discussions about them in an intellectual and intelligent fashion with our hometown emotion mixed in at a proper level. A fan can put that at a much higher level. I try to keep that at a little bit more of a neutral level, because I think that's more respectful of players, refs, coaches, the sport, the game, and the fans themselves. And you guys aren't babies. That's what I always tell myself. You guys are from Chicago. You pretend to be hard and you pretend to be tough and hard-nosed. Well, don't complain when somebody says, man, the Cavs sure are having a great game tonight.
Yeah.
That shouldn't trigger you, because you should know better that you're from a city that prides itself on blue collar and hard work. You know how I know that? I'm from here, and I watched my father do it for 30 years of my life, and I saw how hardworking he was. I know what it's like to be from a place like this. So I assume that you are able to contextualize information that shouldn't bother you. It should give you a sense for how things are going. That's the deepest level that I can think of it as. The rest of the rest of it is also, hey, Jerry Reinsdorf, when I got hired, said, don't be a homer. Do the call. Be the call. Obviously, we want you to be pro Bulls in a sense, which I think we absolutely are. And Stacey helps with that as well. I think I do as well. But we respect the game. We're not homers, and we approach it in an intellectual fashion.
That's one thing I've respected about Jerry. And Jerry can't stand me, but the one thing I've always respected about him is he does tell his announcers, whether it's you, whether it's Will Perdue or Kendall in the pregame show,
sure,
don't bullshit these fans. Be as real as you can be. Now, obviously, I'm sure the organization, if they hear something that pisses them off, I know for a fact they've reached out to guys and, hey, you probably shouldn't have said this or this. But that's with any business. So I did the Bears for 3 months. Terrible 3 months of my career. I have done the Bulls now for 13 years. I did the Sox, obviously. Our guy AJ, I got the Punch AJ All-Star shirt from about 100 years ago. Still,
which feels like a long time ago. Yeah,
yeah, a long time ago. Real quick, just your fan side of you right now. In a sentence, fix the Bears.
Get an offensive line that you can trust, and everything else will probably fall into place. There are elements of this team that are as good as any other high-level defense. There are moments where this offense can look very sharp because of the individual efforts of players. Get an offensive line that you trust, that Caleb Williams can trust. That will fix most of the problems that this team has. Because as you know, Joe, the NFL is a domino game. It is a pure domino effect. If these things on offense go well, it is much easier for the defense to do this. Get you the ball back, you get more opportunities, and over the course of what is eventually going to be an 18-game season, you're going to win more games than you lose. It's not that hard.
Right. Fix the Sox.
Grow the young talent, because that's where you are right now. That's it. Develop young talent. The Bulls are kind of in this same space right now. Like, I know you want to win.
Fix the Bulls. Fix the Bulls.
I know you want to win, but you need to let kids make mistakes in situational mistakes. You need to let them make situational mistakes, not just, hey, he had 5 turnovers in the first half. Well, you're not playing in the fourth quarter. I get you want to get guys to earn minutes, and I think Billy Donovan is getting to that point now where he's letting the leash get a little bit longer and a little bit longer, which makes sense in the final 20 games.
Right.
But you have to do that. You have to go through that, and it's probably going to be not just these last 20 some odd games. It's probably going to be a good chunk of next year too, where these guys need to learn how to draw up and execute a play in the final X amount of seconds of a half, in a quarter, in a game, put them in situations where they're going to be competitive. I don't think they won't be competitive in games. They're talented players that can be competitive.
No, because Billy's a good enough coach that they're always going to be competitive.
And they're always going to be competitive.
People are it's funny. The two biggest enemies of the team right now, at least from what I hear, it seems people don't appreciate Billy Donovan, and the other one, people have not appreciated Nikola Vucevic.
It's an interesting assessment, I think. I think it's Vucevic is a stabilizing force, and
he's
Billy
Chris
Donovan
Bosh. He's a poor version of Chris Bosh because of all the sacrifices he's had to give up when he came here from Orlando. And I don't think people understand that when you are in a place for as long as he was in Orlando and you are the offense, and then you have to come here and take a back seat. And so your warts are exposed a little bit more because you're playing to your strength. And I think people have just unfairly put him in a box, but that's my own personal thing. All right, before I get you out of here, I do this thing in interrogation room. I'll ask you just quick questions, and first thing that comes to your head. All right, have fun with it.
All right.
Best call you feel like you ever made, whether it's radio or TV.
LeBron James beating Toronto in the second round of the 2018 playoffs on radio.
Call you regret that you look back and you go, I should have either hit this harder. I stepped on this. I mean, is there one that you like?
I think I would say there was a Seton Hall Rutgers basketball game where I absolutely botched a game time 3-pointer in overtime.
The name, or you just
Jerome Seagears, I think, was taking the shot for Rutgers. I stumbled while the ball was in the air. I just stumbled on my words, and I could not recover. Bad call, just a bad call all around.
In your lifetime, who do you think which is the greatest sports call in your mind?
Do you believe in miracles? But you know what? I'm sorry, that's not in my lifetime. So to be fair, that's not in my lifetime. I would say.
But you think that's the best call? Okay.
I think that's the best call of the last 50 years, easily. Of my lifetime, I would say it is Game 1, 88. It's a tie between Scully and Buck on TV and radio for Gibson's home.
Gotcha. Yeah. My favorite, Miracle on Ice, obviously, is second.
Yeah.
Down goes Frazier, and that's because as kids growing up, whenever someone fell or tripped, you'd always go, down goes Frazier. So that was more of a personal thing. That was when my friend group all used to rip.
That also might be our buddy Tom Hamilton's favorite call growing up as well, right, for obvious reasons.
Would you ever do be a cameo on a sports video game, or have you been asked to do that?
I've never been asked. I would love to do that. I think that would be for somebody who grew up in the era of video games, sports video games, that would be an awesome thing.
Next Chicago team to win a playoff game.
Let's see. I think the Bears will have the best shot. Bears have the best shot.
Dogs or cats? Either,
but I grew up with cats, so okay. I think cats get a bad rep more than anything else.
Best Chicago athlete not named Michael that you grew up around.
That I grew up with
in your lifetime. Yeah.
One. Yeah. Man, I would say. I'm very biased. Maddox, I thought was the best. Is one of the best pitchers in the history of the game for completely different reasons.
Okay. Who speaks first, Trump and Zelensky or Stacey King and Joe Cowley?
Oh my God, that's an incredible question. I think Cowley. I think Cowley jumps or no. I think Stacey tries to jump you. I think Stacey tries to jump you first.
I think Trump Zelensky will speak first before Stacey. All right, last one. The entire team plane goes down on a deserted island. This is the whole traveling party. Coaches, players. First eaten, and who's the last survivor?
Last survivor. I'm gonna say Eric Waters is the last survivor. He's one of the trainers. And, medical performance people. I might be the first to go, man. I might be the first one.
They're going to go after. Right? They're going to get Swirsky before they go after you. Swirsky's done.
Poor Swers. Here's the thing. This is how Swirsky is so kind that he would volunteer himself.
He'd be like, that's true.
It's like, take me out. It's okay.
Yeah.
You guys.
As long as you guys say grace when you do it, I'm fine with it.
I'm okay. So, that's how sweet of a man he is.
Adam, thanks, dude. I could talk to you all day about all these kind of things. So I appreciate you jumping on, and I mean it. I don't think people in Chicago realize, and obviously, I loved when Benetti was here too, because I just think it gives just a oomph town wide. And it's no slap on what's going on now with the White Sox, but to me, you guys like Benetti, I just think you guys are great, and people that grow up with the legends, Scully and things. And then all of a sudden you think, well, who's the next generation? And now you feel good about who that next generation is with there's guys like you, Benetti. And I love the fact that you guys do it all local, national. It's great. I love talking NFL with you Steelers. So, dude, thanks for jumping on with this.
Absolutely, buddy. Anytime. Appreciate you.
All right. I'll see you later.
See you.
He's great. Look, hopefully Chicago understands how good they have it with him and when Benetti was here. And we'll get to that in a second when we break the list out. All right, let's go to the Cowley Island rant. Let's get that out of the way. It's funny. About 3 weeks ago, I don't know who it was. I think the people say shit just to go against the river tide and the stream. That Ace Bailey or that somehow Dylan Harper from Rutgers were better than Cooper Flagg. Did somebody, I think it was Kendall, who I'm going to have to talk to, said that Modest is already Cooper Flagg or better than Cooper Flagg. Let's put this. I watched him again yesterday. I watched Duke, his last game at Cameron. I've watched Ace Bailey. I've watched Dylan Harper. Great individual talents for Rutgers. Great individual players. Game translates to the NBA. That's not what I'm talking about. The team's 14-15. Rutgers is 14-15 with the second and third pick of the NBA draft. So, great individual talent, but let's put it in perspective. Cooper Flagg, Duke, 27-3, leads the team in scoring, leads the team in rebound. And by the way, they're going to have like 3 guys drafted from that team. Leads them in scoring, leads them in rebounds, leads them in assists, leads them in steals, leads them in blocks. And they have a 7-2 center who's a top 10 pick. Cooper Flagg leads them in blocks. For anybody that and that's the skill set. For anyone that doesn't understand the makeup of this kid, and a lot of you obviously don't because you don't talk to the same people that the media, that the NBA writers talk to, the makeup of this kid is, forget the skill set, the makeup of him is up here. If you watch him during a game, his excitement for getting teammates to succeed, whether he's on the bench or on the court, whether it's assists, whatever he does, his genuine excitement about just winning and teammates succeeding is LeBron-like. I'm talking about his makeup as far as sharing in that joy, because that was the big thing on LeBron. His whole thing was, I rise, everybody rises, and I want everybody to rise with me. He's going to be phenomenal. And every time I watch him, I get more and more pissed that the Bulls didn't recognize this earlier on and handle their business the way it should be handled in the first half of the season when they were showcasing guys. So I don't know how to say it. If he misses, to me, it would be one of the biggest misses in the NBA in at least a decade. Because I just don't think he's going to miss. I just don't think that he can bust out because the makeup is so high that I don't think people are putting enough credit on him. So Cooper Flagg, go do you, my man. All right, let's get to the list. We had Adam Amin on. So now again, this list is probably going to piss some people off. I probably could have thrown this on Cowley Island. These are my top 5 broadcasters since I've been in Chicago in 97. I came here. And spoiler alert, Harry, and not just because of my disdain for the Cubs, was the most overrated announcer. For a guy coming out of town, look, again, this is my list. If you don't like it, get your podcast. This is my list of the top 5 broadcasters. Harry Carey is not on it. Number 5, because I knew him off, I didn't really love his broadcast all the time, but the Hawk was freaking fantastic. Because the shit off the air was so much better than on the air. The stories he would tell, all that kind of stuff. 4, I got a tie. It's my list. I can do what I want with it. Neil Funk, great. Bulls, legend. And then Steve Stone. So, tie right there. Number 3, again, because I've known him away from it, Ed Farmer. And again, it was the Ed stories. Might not have been his broadcast. The Ed stories off the away from the diamond were fantastic. And I'll tell you what, Ed, if Ed told you, hey, bring your golf clubs, we're going to a top 5 golf course in the country. Guess where you were going? To a top 5 golf course. Hey, bring your passport because we're going to a tour of the Oval Office. Oh, bullshit. No, you're standing in the Oval Office. I mean, that's what Ed Farmer was. Number 2, brought his name up, Jason Benetti. I thought he was fantastic. Egregious that the White Sox did that. Number 1, the guy I just had on, Adam Amin. That's why I had him on. He's the best. I love his NFL broadcast. If you guys have not listened to Adam Amin do a Fox NFL game, it was with Schlereth a lot of games 2 years ago, and this year it was, I think, Sanchez. He had the second half of the season, and I thought Sanchez was really good, and I think Adam made him better. I think Adam's the best. So you don't like my list? Too bad. Get your own list. Those are my 5 guys, 6 with the tie. So that's it. Thanks to Adam and me. Thanks to Ryan McGuffey again for getting this all together. And remember, I got next.